no Lincolnian Emancipation Proclamation, no Johnsonian Civil Rights Bill can totally bring this kind of freedom. The confrontation between the forces of power demanding change and the forces of power dedicated to the preserving of the status quo. Now, power properly understood is nothing but the ability to achieve purpose. It is the strength required to bring about social, political, and economic change. Walter Reuther defined power one day. He said, "Power is the ability of a labor union like UAW to make the most powerful corporation in the world, General Motors, say yes when it wants to say no." That's power. Now, a lot of us are preachers, and all of us have our moral convictions and concerns, and so often we have problems with power. There is nothing wrong with power. Power is used correctly. You see, what happened is that some of our philosophers got off base. And one of the great problems of history is that the concepts of love and power have usually been contrasted as opposites, polar opposites, so that love is identified with a resignation of power and power with a denial of love. It was this misinterpretation that caused the philosopher Nietzsche, who was the philosopher of the will to power, to reject the Christian concept of love. It was the same misinterpretation which induced Christian theologians to reject Nietzsche's philosophy of the will to power in the name of the Christian idea of love. Now, we got to get this thing right. What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best. Power at its best is love, implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against love. And so I say to you today, my friends, that you may be able to speak with the tongues of men and angels. You may have the eloquence of articulate speech, but if you have not love, it means nothing. Yes, you may have the gift of prophecy. You may have the gift of scientific prediction and understand the behavior of molecules. You may break into the storehouse of nature and bring forth many new insights. Yes, you may ascend to the heights of academic achievement so that you have all knowledge. And you may boast of your great institutions of learning and the boundless extent of your degrees, but if you have not love, all of these mean absolutely nothing. You may even give your goods to feed the poor. You may bestow great gifts to charity. You may tower high in philanthropy. But if you have not love, your charity means nothing. You may even give your body to be burned and die the death of a martyr, and your spilled blood may be a symbol of honor for generations yet unborn. And thousands may praise you as one of history's greatest heroes. But if you have not love, your blood was spilt in vain. What I'm trying to get you to see this morning is that a man may be self-centered in his self-denial and self-righteous in his self-sacrifice. His generosity may feed his ego, and his piety may feed his pride. And so without love, benevolence becomes egotism, and martyrdom becomes spiritual pride. I want to say to you as I move to my conclusion, as we talk about where do we go from here, we must honestly face the fact that the movement must address itself to the question of restructuring the whole of American society.
Good morning. My name is Tiffany Roberts, and I bring you greetings on behalf of the Justice Reform Partnership. We are a collective of organizations and individuals supporting criminal justice reform in Georgia and the Southeast. We started as just 5 organizations and now are more than 50 organizations and individuals with a common goal. Through education, community engagement, and advocacy, we hope to reduce the harm caused by the criminal legal system. This year, on our 10th Justice Day at the Capitol, virtually, we raised the words of our Georgia son, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., near the sunset of his life. A book-length text followed this 1967 address to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. At that time, the nation was reeling from uprisings. Communities questioned whether efforts had been made in vain. The answer, though, for many, was to accept that we had not arrived. We were cautioned to choose between chaos and community by Dr. King. He said benevolence could become egotism. He said that martyrdom could become spiritual pride. We hope that you have joined us today in the spirit of our collective humanity. We hope that you are here to learn and to share, to consider our responsibility to stamp out every remnant of chattel slavery in this nation, including those that remain in the criminal legal system. What Dr. King demands and what we hope you embrace today is that we must remake America. We too are experiencing great loss at this moment. We too are reeling from and healing from uprisings. We too are living in the trauma of so much Black death and state violence. We too are confronted with lawmakers who want to reclaim for themselves every gain that we've made. Just this week, a voter suppression bill was passed in one chamber, well, actually more than one. And just yesterday, HB 286, a bill that serves as an assault on resistance and community safety, was approved in the House. Not only is it a disgrace because it tramples on the right to protest, but it also prevents local governments from giving voice to Dr. King's edict that budgets are moral documents. Localities whose moral compass tells them that ballooning law enforcement budgets endanger us, while families starve and have unmet needs for both their health, their shelter, and their mental wellness. Today, we will discuss the chaos that many of us are living through, and we will talk about how we can build community out of the rubble. We hope that we can harness that power that is not the polar opposite of love. We hope that we can harness that love for community that is not anemic and it's not the polar opposite of power. We are here because we know there are no two sides to this issue. We know that it is not debatable whether we are all human beings deserving of dignity. We understand that we don't need to argue about whether our brothers and sisters should be treated with compassion and care. There are no two sides. Dr. King was right in 1967, and we are right today. We must remake this America. So thank you again for joining us for Justice Day 2021. We hope that this is just the beginning or a continuation of our relationship and community with you all. And with that, I will hand it over to Micah Hurskind who will talk to you a little bit about using the Whova interface and what we are looking forward to today during Justice Day.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here with you all, and welcome to Justice Day 2021. I'm going to share my screen and just do a couple quick housekeeping notes before we jump into the day. And so first, I just want to give everyone a quick walkthrough of Whova, just to make sure everyone knows exactly how it works. So if you're here, it means you've at least figured it out to some extent, which is great. And I want to highlight that, as you've already seen, you can find all of the events for today in the agenda by clicking on the agenda item on the toolbar. And that will give you information on basically which link to click for each event and how to get into those. And so, for example, for the breakout sessions, there are different options. And you'll enter in through a link that is in that agenda item. And so just make sure that you're clicking on each agenda item when it's ready. I also want to just bring your attention to some of the different features of Whova so you can see who the various attendees are and connect with folks who are doing similar work to you. You can use the community function in order to participate in some of the forums. And then in particular, I want to draw your attention to the video gallery. And so in the video gallery, we're really thrilled this year to have not only our programming during Justice Day, but also to feature this bank of pre-recorded videos that provide various deep dives into many areas of the criminal legal system. And these have been filmed and recorded by members and friends of the JRP. And so all participants of Justice Day will have access to this Whova platform and these videos for the following year, meaning that you can return to these videos at any time. And so I just want to highlight, you can see we have videos ranging from information on the Policing Alternatives and Diversion Initiative here in Atlanta, the fight for higher education in Georgia prisons, understanding the criminal, the juvenile justice system in Georgia. And I'm not gonna name them all, but as you can see, it's really a fantastic lineup of experts in the field on various issues of the criminal legal system within Georgia. So I hope that you'll take a moment to scan through these videos. They're all about 4 to 5 minutes and really take some time to learn more about these crucial issues. And then the last thing I want to draw your attention to on Whova is this documents section. And so here there are a bunch of different agenda handouts. Each of these are linked to the agenda, so you can find them, you can find documents for various agenda items within the agenda, but if you want to see all of them, speakers will be referencing those throughout the day, so you can go ahead and access all of those here. The other quick thing that I just want to note is the Justice Reform Partnership has a new website, which is very exciting. And so the link is justicereformpartnership.org, which we will drop in the chat on Whova. And I just want to draw your attention, to our legislation page on the site. And so here you can go and see updated information on bills that the JRP supports and bills that the JRP opposes. And it's slow to load, so I might not actually show you right now, but this will be updated throughout the legislative session. So be sure to check back for more information regarding bills to be thinking about, bills that are on the Justice Reform Partnership's radar throughout this legislative session. The last thing I want to say is that because we're packing a lot of information into a short time, we won't be doing lengthy speaker introductions, but again, you can see speaker profiles on Whova. And so with that, I think we might be having some technical difficulties, but Vanessa Bahar, are you on by chance? And if not, we'll just keep moving. But Vanessa Bahar?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, great. So I'm going to turn it over. Sorry, I didn't see your name there. So I'm going to turn it over to Vanessa Bahar, who is a poet and who's going to open the day with a poem that Vanessa has written and is going to perform today. So Vanessa, go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Vanessa Bahar, and I am so pleased to be with you all this morning. I served time in prison, and since getting out, I have completely changed my life around. So this poem is representing people that have been through the system and just kind of telling you some of the things that you go through upon release. All right, I'll get right into it. They called my name today to pack it up. I'm finally home. I've waited for this moment for 6 years long. I remember that day I first arrived at Metro State Prison. Feelings of uncertainty. My 3-week-old, I was missing. Got off the bus to officers yelling like they had lost their mind. Okay, I learned my lesson. It's not gonna take all that time. Had a long road ahead, had to pray my way through. You learn a lot about yourself when it's only you. I love when they do mail call and say, Bahar, you have a visit. How did I get caught up in this crazy, corrupt system? How was I gonna make it 6 long years? How many nights of quiet, painful tears? Well, here I am stepping back out into this world. I served my time, the world is mine. I'm Valerie's baby girl. I'm gonna make my mama proud and do the best at being a mom. I'm gonna give it all I've got, work hard at getting a job. Been home for 2 weeks now, filled out 85 applications. When I check yes, I'm a felon, they say the position has been taken. I have to pay for this leg monitor and these probation fees. How am I supposed to pay these things if nobody hire me? I thought I paid my debt with all those years away, but now I'm back in society. They say I still have to pay. You cannot work a normal job. No way can you bear arms. Don't even think about voting. If you try, you'll catch a charge. You cannot foster children. You cannot leave the state. You cannot complain about these things or they'll say you're full of hate. I'm not gonna lie. I lied so I could get a job. I checked no and aced my interview and asked forgiveness from God. I worked so hard, was always on time, was happy to pay some bills. Background check came back, they fired me. And I'm gonna keep it all the way real. They taxed a couple checks I got, but I still didn't have any rights. I became so angry inside because this just wasn't right. I overcame these obstacles and became an entrepreneur ×4. I got my record cleared and I got my rights restored. I founded a Mother's Day brunch for the moms of victims of police brutality, including Eric Garner's mom and countless other families. I have a successful tax business and I'm part owner of one of the largest nightclubs in the United States. We feed the needy and help people stay out of trouble by providing a safe entertainment place. I foster children, I own my guns, and I vote every chance I get. But it's not just about me. There should still be no taxation without representation. The fight isn't over yet. Please make sure you vote if you have the right to. There are 266,000 Georgians that don't have the same rights as you. I'm Vanessa Bahar, thank you. And that concludes my poem. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. That was wonderful and so thoughtful. We appreciate you spending time with us today. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Roberta Tony Myers to moderate our first panel, which will focus on some of the experiences we've had with criminal legal reform to date in Georgia. Tony, take it away.
Thank you. First, Vanessa, thank you for feeding our spirits with the truth of that story, which is true for so many women like yourself who've had to navigate all of the collateral consequences and challenges that have been hoisted onto people who go through the system. Good morning. I'm Roberta Myers Douglas. People call me Tony. I'm the Director of State Strategy at the Legal Action Center. I am happy to introduce our fierce warriors for justice, Georgia advocates Marissa Dodson, Maisie Lynn Causey, and Marilyn Wynn. Marissa is the Director of Policy at the Southern Center for Human Rights. Maisie Lynn is the General Counsel and Policy Advocate at the Georgia Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, that's also in short called GACDO. And Ms. Marilyn is the Executive Director and co-founder of Women on the Rise. Again, please visit the speaker panel to see the full biographies of our speakers on Hoover. Also, again, there are several handouts you all may retrieve on demand that provides a lot of the relevant statistics and descriptions of various pieces of legislation that you will hear about in this session or in the breakout sessions. We encourage you to review them all. These panelists will provide an overview of statewide and local reforms of importance to criminal legal system reform in Georgia. They will provide a recap of the 2020 Georgia legislative session, the outcomes, and discuss the advocacy efforts and policy trends that are part of our movement to liberate and free people from entanglement within the criminal legal system. Again, the theme today is, where do we go from here? Community over chaos. But before knowing where we are going, we have to know where we are coming from and reflect on that journey to learn lessons and know what work is ahead of us. Marissa, let's begin with you with setting the stage. So even before this past year, there was a significant amount of work that has led to where we are at this moment. Can you contextualize where we are now by discussing the Nathan Deal years?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Tony, and good morning to you all. When Governor Deal took office in 2011, the state was spending more than $1 billion on the state's correction system. This figure didn't even include jails or law enforcement agencies. The state had the 4th highest rate of incarceration in the country, with 1 in 70 Georgians in prison. The prisons were already at 107% capacity and was expected to grow by 8% over the following 5 years. Governor Deal established the Council on Criminal Justice Reform and made criminal justice a priority for his administration in his very first State of the State address. That year, the council was created by statute with mandates to reduce prison growth and improve public safety by reinvesting savings into evidence-based strategies proven to reduce recidivism and improve public safety. The following year, the state unanimously passed legislation, House Bill 1176, that was probably the most significant of all the Deal years. It created a statewide accountability court system to provide community-based programs to support people primarily dealing with substance use and mental health issues. Felony thresholds were raised from theft from $500 to $1,500, and there were distinctions made for different types of burglaries and for forgeries. The state developed a drug possession scheme that was based on weight and not just occurrence, and we created presumptive probation, which presumed incarceration for people, which presumed probation instead of incarceration for people charged with drug possession. We also started to allow judges to depart from excessive mandatory minimum sentences. The next year, in 2013, the council focused on the juvenile system, where we were spending almost $100,000 per child who were sent to the DJJ facilities. The General Assembly passed legislation to rewrite almost the entire juvenile code to increase community-based programs by incentivizing counties to invest in more effective interventions for children and finding ways to identify alternatives for children who are finding themselves in the system. In 2014, the council took up reentry and created the Program and Treatment Completion Certificate, which creates a rebuttable presumption for employers who hire people who were incarcerated if they're later sued for civil liability. The law was also changed to allow judicial discretion for driver's license suspensions for people convicted of drug offenses. In the final years of the Deal administration, the council continued to study necessary reforms and make recommendations to the General Assembly. In 2015 and 2016, the council recommended and the General Assembly passed legislation allowing earlier parole eligibility for people convicted of certain drug offenses, and the state also eliminated the lifetime ban on food stamps for people with drug convictions. The law also was changed to provide additional mechanisms for people to have their records sealed from employers and other decision makers. There is still much to be done, but Deal's leadership ushered in a new era in our state. By the end of the Deal administration, we had ban the box in our state. The prison admissions rates were lower than they had been in decades, and we saw reductions in the racial disproportionate, racial disproportionate numbers that we saw in terms of the numbers of Black people that were being sent to prison versus the numbers of whites. We still, however, have significant racial and economic disparities in our system. We continue to use incarceration and correctional control in ways that do not promote safety. Community and elected officials must continue to lift up the experiences, data, and evidence that can be used to truly achieve healthy and safe communities. We have an example with the leadership of Deal and the Council on Criminal Justice Reform to find ways to promote health and safety without relying on our criminal legal systems.
Marissa, before I pivot to our other panelists, could you just give a quick overview of some of the big legislative wins that have happened out of 2020?
Yeah, I wish there were more to talk about. Unfortunately, there aren't. We What I will highlight, though, is that there was Senate Bill 288 that passed last year that will expanded record restriction. It was led by one of our JRP partners, the Georgia Justice Project, who's been leading on reentry efforts for many years. And so now we finally have a mechanism in the law to allow people who weren't able to get their records restricted by way of conviction are able to get their records restricted now. The other reform that was a pretty big deal in terms of a win for us was a bill, House Bill 984, that I will allow Maisie Lynn Causey to talk about on the panel, since that was an initiative that was led by GACTL.
Great, thank you, thank you. Maisie Lynn, as a lobbyist for GACTL, you not only work at the legislature, but also closely with those in our criminal courtrooms. In the context of past reforms in Georgia, as Marissa kind of laid out, what would you say were some of the biggest legislative losses from 2008 to present? And then you can go into some of the work that you've been doing through GACTL as well.
Good morning. Thanks. Good morning, Tony. Thanks for having me today. I've heard your question. I'm going to piggyback on what Marissa ended with, and then I'll jump to your question, Tony. As Marissa mentioned, House Bill 984 was positive coming out of last year's legislative session, and that legislation provides more fairness in sentencing throughout our state. A couple things it does: it helps people to have some clarity around when their sentences have to run if they appeal their case and unfortunately lose. There was a gap in the law there that we helped to shore up. And I'd say that the most important thing coming out of that bill is the ability for people to get credit for every day they spend behind bars or in any kind of facility prior to the conclusion of their case once they've been arrested on the charges. Without this legislation, there were people spending time, for instance, on probation revocation sentences in our state system without enjoying the credit of that time being applied to the case that caused the revocation to start with. So we are pleased that that legislation passed unanimously last year. It was very bipartisan support, and we are seeing it work in our system now. The pandemic has certainly slowed down court cases, but we are already seeing that bill impact people's lives for the better. Now, I will be honest, it doesn't shore up every situation where someone spends time incarcerated in pretrial situations. It all depends upon their arrest date. It's one of those bills that has a lot of weedy details that make it impossible for it to apply to everyone. But we really do cohort in that bill and saved them a lot of time through that increased fairness in sentencing. So as we look to 2000, I certainly, there have been some losses, and too many to really go through all of them. And unfortunately, I think some of them are really more losses in hindsight than we realized at the time that they were happening. And I'll start with one of those. If we go all the way back to 2009, Senate Bill 13 was passed to great delight, frankly, of many within the criminal legal system, especially in the defense bar. It allowed for life without parole to be a sentence on murder cases in Georgia. And I know at first glance that probably doesn't sound like it would bring much delight. At the same time, what that legislation enabled us to do was to reduce the number of death sentences being issued in our state. Giving some flexibility around sentencing of murder cases allowed us to frankly save many lives. Unfortunately, as we look back on that legislation now and see the devastation that LWOP sentences are having on the criminal legal system, it's hard to say what we would do if we could go back in time. The benefits have been real from that legislation, but so have the detriments. And I think we see this a lot in our criminal code. Once a concept is introduced, it begins to be expanded. We get comfortable with it. And this notion of LWOP becomes, I would say, almost objectified. We lose sight of what it really means for someone to be sentenced to spend the absolute rest of their life in prison without any chance of parole. And it becomes easier for legislation to add that sentence in. It just becomes more commonplace. And unfortunately, I think that's happening. It has become too easy to write that into our code in other areas beyond murder, where we are just not giving anyone a chance to ever get out of prison again. So while I certainly appreciate where that legislation began, why it began, and the good that it has done, I also have to say that there's a bit of a loss that we've suffered by having that now built into our code. Another systemic loss that we have suffered in the past decade is the loss of standards for the oversight of the public defender system in Georgia. Many here will know that back in 2003, some legislation was passed that created what we have today of the statewide Georgia Public Defender Council. It is a statewide public defender system that seeks to ensure quality representation for everyone throughout our state, no matter your income. And it has achieved many, many wondrous things for people. Having that systemic provision of counsel in place has made quite a difference. When it was enacted, though, it was created so that there were standards in place to help guide the work. And I'm just going to read a few of those from the legislation as it was enacted. For instance, it prescribed the creation of standards for the caseloads that public defenders would have to be accountable for defending. It established standards for the actual representation offered by those lawyers. It offered standards for the qualifications and performance of counsel as they represent people in both their criminal prosecutions. And there were many more. And since that time, those standards have been taken out of the law. And even in the name of the organization, it started out being the Georgia Public Defender Standards Council, and the standards were a preeminent aspect or characteristic of that council. We removed the standards from the requirements and from their name. And that when that repeal happened, I feel like that was a true loss to helping ensure that there is consistent quality representation statewide that had been built into that bill to begin with, and into that system to begin with. The other thing that happened to the Georgia Public Defender Council is that it was moved out of the judicial branch and into the executive branch of government. And that is important because where an agency sits within our government affects everything from the way that their money is appropriated to the ways that they interact with the checks and balances of our governmental system. So that move also has been a loss to our defense community, to have the shift in oversight from the judiciary to the executive. I'll just give you a couple of legislative losses that are more recent that folks here probably remember and can mourn with me. Back in 2017, during Governor Deal's amazing reform efforts, parallel to that, we were brought with some legislation called Back the Badge. And this is emblematic of the significant losses that have come from the lack of a will to address the various gateways into the criminal legal system in favor of focusing on expanding criminal liability, enhancing penalties, and ensuring punishment. And this, I will say that this is unfortunately a bipartisan effort. It is certainly not only Republicans that are filing bills to inflate our criminal code. There remains too little focus on improving policing practices and too much focus elevating the status of law enforcement. And like I said, we don't have to look back very far to see that plainly reflected in the measures that are being adopted. Back the Badge, back in 2017, included not only enhancements for crimes against police, but it brought more children into the adult system when certain crimes are perpetrated where the alleged victim is a police officer. The expansion of SB 440, as we call it, which is the mechanism by which children can be prosecuted as adults in our state, is something that it must be stopped. year after year, we see attempts to expand the ability for prosecution of children as adults. And I would encourage everyone listening to join us in our efforts to stop that madness. And then more recently, back in 2020, I would bring your attention to what we all thought would be something we could just purely delight in, and that was the hate crimes legislation that was passed last year, HB 426. Unfortunately, we had to swallow a very bitter pill in order to get HB 426 passed, and that was HB 838, which was the police hate crimes bill. So just as we are expanding and recognizing that hate has no place when it's perpetrated against our citizens, the only way that that measure was able to be achieved was to also expand, again, the status of police officers. And I can't say it any better than Georgia NAACP President Reverend James Woodall did back last year when that legislation was passed. He said that this compromise in the political process will forever ring throughout history as a signal that Black lives are a bargaining chip toward a political end, and dead Black bodies are an expendable commodity in the halls of legislative power. I will leave you with Reverend Woodall's quote, because I think that is unfortunately the compromise we are seeing too often and the significant source of our losses in the legislative arena.
Lady Lynn. I'm hoping that folks are hearing how important it is for us to work across the system and looking from every point of contact that people may have with the criminal legal system. We have our work cut out with dealing with what's happening with police interactions, what happens to people through the judicial process, what's happening within the correction system, and then, of course, what's happening to people once they're out and still have the claw of the system in their back. Ms. Marilyn, with how much has happened, not just in 2020, but over the past decade, significant grassroots organizing efforts have been part of the journey toward criminal legal system reform in Georgia. Can you talk about some of the campaigns led by Women on the Rise and the founding of the Communities Over Cages Alliance?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, and thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be part of Justice Day to share these victories and accomplishments. There have been a decade worth of work that has gone into the reformation of the criminal legal system in the city of Atlanta, not only to end mass incarceration, but to create a community for safety for everyone. And in the past 10 years, leading up to some of the legislation that has been passed, Women on the Rise, along with other organizations in collaboration, we started in 2014, actually started before 2014, somewhere around 2011. But in 2014, the city of Atlanta was the first entity to ban a box that gave formerly incarcerated individuals the opportunity to have employment with a background. And I want to say this before, okay, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to leave it where it is. And so the next thing we did, 2015, we was busy for almost 10 years here. And the next thing we did, we had the sex workers banishment ordinance that was passed in 2015, which created PAD, which is now called Policing Alternative Diversion Initiative. It was the long name of Fulton County Pre-Arrest Diversion Initiative. People may know it by that. But that banishment law, what we passed in 2015, created PAD, which now is a 501c3 organization that supports people that are not going to jail, but actually getting services that they need. And then in 2017, we came back with the reclassification of marijuana, where our young Black men were going to jail for a roach, half ounce or less of marijuana, serving time, year, 2 years, and thousands of dollars in fines. We were able to get that legislation to a non-arrestable offense and a maximum fine of $75, no matter how many times that person has been arrested. And then there's the quality of life crimes, quality of life ordinances that the city of Atlanta had on their books. There was 81 of those. In 2017, again, we was able to get 41 of those 81 ordinances removed from the books, which these was nonsense ordinances that gave APD opportunity to stop people, harass people, targeted people, and all of the things that they do to arrest folks. And in 2018, when the mayor, when the president of the United States then started to separate children from their parents in immigrations, the mayor decided that no more for Atlanta. So she ended the ICE contract with the city of Atlanta. Not only the ICE contract did she end, she also ended the federal detainee contract, where federal marshals would use city of Atlanta jail to hold federal detainees. Then we launched the Community Over Cages campaign in 2018, which led us to build a alliance. We built an alliance, and not only alliance, we did a task force that went for a year to try to help the mayor figure out how we can close and repurpose the city of Atlanta, ACDC Atlanta jail. And after that, we actually did, we won legislation in May of 2019 to actually close and repurpose ACDC. And that led to the task force that convened for the year. Then the uprising in the city of Atlanta came about, and then we got COVID, and then we created an anchor team to continue to work in the city of Atlanta to reform the city into what we are calling a city for safety. And so those are the things that happened in the past 10 years with Women on the Rise and some of the other organizations that we work with in collaboration.
Thank you. One thing I want to stress to our participants, how important it is to have the leadership of directly impacted individuals in deciding the strategies and priorities that many groups and organizations that are working on criminal legal system reform does. They need to be taking leadership and following the direction of folks who have experienced these harsh systems, and allow folks to determine what should be prioritized based on what they know and what they have lived. And without that, I can truly say, just doing this work for 30 years, you won't get anywhere if you are not listening to and being guided by the perspective of people who are directly impacted. So thank you, Ms. Marilyn, for organizing people consistently, building leadership in the community and engaging directly impacted people in this movement and effort. So before we close out, I would love to hear from each of you. And Marissa, I'll start with you. Can you talk a little bit about maybe what we can do to facilitate coalition building a little bit better between advocacy groups? And Ms. Marilyn, I'll ask for you to talk about grassroots organizing, but just what are some of the lessons learned that you all have had over the years, and what we could do better and as we move forward in trying to address the chaos that we consistently are in because of the people who we have in office? So Marissa, if you can take a minute to talk about that, and then Maisie Lynn, and then I'll come to you, Ms. Marilyn, to close us out.
Thanks, Tony. I think what you said first is most important, which is to recognize who we serve, who we're in this work for, and to get out of the way of people who have these lived experiences and figure out how to be more supportive to uplifting the voices and experiences and perspectives that are actually going to bring about change. I think sometimes advocacy organizations, with our degrees and our whatever it is that makes us feel like we have something to say, we can often take up much too much space in these areas. And so I would just say one of my first recommendations is to figure out how to listen more. Particularly if you are an organization or a part of an organization or movement and aren't directly impacted. I would also suggest being a part of coalitions like the Justice Reform Partnership, finding some place to connect, finding some organization particularly an organization that's led by formerly incarcerated people like Women on the Rise. The concept of deciding what issues, how we can build solidarity is also something I would want to raise as something for folks to think about. There are a lot of intersecting issues with criminal legal reform, and so we should be more thoughtful about the immigration space, for example, economic injustice, public education, affordable housing, infrastructure, and transportation. It is important that we acknowledge how we can build momentum and build allies with people who are fighting the same fight for the same marginalized and oppressed communities. And then I would say give back. If you're somebody who has resources, you have some money and time, find somewhere to volunteer, find somewhere to write a check. There are people doing this work on the ground every single day who aren't on your national cable news stations. They're not always in front of a microphone. And those are the most important people that should be lifted up and supported and resourced. And so find ways to give money to organizations and individuals who are on the ground doing this important work.
Thank you. Maisie Lynn? You're muted.
Marissa just ended with what exactly I was going to start, and that is that the women like Ms. Wynn and others who are leading the charge, they need our money, they need our resources. If you've got them, you should please share them. And I think one of the aspects that's most beautiful about the Justice Reform Partnership is the coalition is built of a mix of people with backgrounds and varied experiences and diverse backgrounds. And I think if you have a chance to even look back at some of our programming and archived videos, you'll see that some of the most powerful, I'll call them seminars or presentations that you will see archived there are from people who've been directly impacted by the system. It's one thing for me as a lawyer and former public defender to come and tell war stories about my clients' cases and situations that they are egregious sometimes, and they are powerful stories, but it is nothing compared to when that client or that person or that family member who was impacted can come and tell the story from their perspective. And you hear just the layers of depth and richness that can come through in a way that I, as an advocate and lawyer, I cannot possibly do justice to. So I think that's another place of also finding ways to promote those voices like Marissa suggested. Another thing I appreciate so much about the Reform Partnership is our ability to do that, sometimes even anonymously. No one wants to be a token. No one wants to be further traumatized after the criminal legal system has chewed them up and spit them out. But we do want to find creative ways for their voice and their story to come through. So if there are ways to do that, let's join together and do that through anonymous things, through videos, through other means of communicating their stories. And I think the other, sorry, I've just lost my third thought about what I was going to tell you. I'm sorry, it's not coming to my mind. So I won't belabor the point, but thank you, Tony, for asking that question, because I do think it's important for us to always remember that a client, in my world as a defense lawyer, a client-focused perspective makes all the difference. And I can't have that if I'm not doing exactly what Marissa said, by listening, stopping my mouth as much as a lawyer wants to talk, and listening and learning so that that their story and their voice can be heard in the system too.
Thank you, Maisie Lynn. And Ms. Marilyn, I'll let you have the final say on what community coalition and organizing should look like and how we can do better.
Okay. I think, it's sometimes, when I started this journey, community organizing and grassroots organizing was new to me. But I learned early that if we can communicate and collaborate together, regardless, Marissa, of your credentials, we need those credentials to lead us to, we can give the ideas, but we need you guys also to lead us to where we need to go and to speak the language that we need, that some of us actually don't have, or some of us actually don't have the, we don't have the self-esteem to think that we can make these changes. So that's where, Women on the Rise come in at, We collaborate with women. We do grassroots we do outreach. We do canvassing, reaching out to women that have been impacted by the system, through the system, and educating them on the policies, educating them on anything that they can do. And what we found to be one barrier is those women come out with a need. So Women on the Rise expanded our needs to support those women with the essential needs that they need, such as housing and jobs and all the things that they need, so they can be a part of the movement. They can't be a part of the movement if they don't have nowhere to stay. They can't be a part of the movement if they don't have employment. So that is a big piece of it. And once we do that, then we are engaging folks with people just like the Justice Reform Partnership, and letting them see that they do have a voice. Their lived experience is worth more than $1 million if they have the courage to get up and talk about it or share it. What barriers that you face, what pain that you have had during your incarceration, because it didn't just incarcerate you, it incarcerates your whole family if they cared anything about you, or even if they didn't care. Everybody's incarcerated there. So our thing, as far as grassroots organization, is building alliances and collaborations with organizations just like Southern Center for Human Rights, Legal Action Center, all the people that doing work around the criminal justice reform to end mass incarceration, especially for people and women of color.
I just wanted to jump in real quick and say, you are so right, Miss Marilyn. We have learned so much from each other, I think. And just one real quick thing that I think, I'm invited to spaces sometimes, like the degrees or the professionalism stuff gets me invited to tables. And sometimes I need to say, that's not my seat, that's not my seat to sit there. And sometimes we need to do that. Make room means say, thank you for the opportunity to be there. I actually think that there's somebody who's more qualified to share their experience with you that day.
Yeah, but we need each other. It's not just us, but we need you guys as well. So we need each other, and the collaborations and the alliances and all the things that we are in together makes the whole, bring it full circle and makes that difference.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I know we are out of time. I could talk to you all day. Thank you, sister allies, for your brilliant minds and steadfast quest for justice. Micah Herskin will now provide some details as we head into our first round of breakout sessions. So thank you again, all.
All right, bye-bye.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. That was a wonderful beginning to the day. So for all of our participants watching on Whova, what we're going to do now is something that might feel a little complicated, but I'm going to share my screen to make it as clear as possible. So we're going to be heading into breakout rooms. And so this would normally be the part of a conference where everyone is scrambling around to find which room they're going to join. And in this case, we're going to be joining the Zoom session. So right now you all are watching on Whova, and you'll be watching on Whova for the rest of the panels and sort of the times when we're all together. But for these breakout sessions, what we're going to do is everyone is going to jump on the Zoom that we're using. So we'll let you in from the waiting room, and what you have to do is return to your agenda on Whova. You can see the instructions here. Click View Session on Breakout 1, the agenda item Breakout 1. And then if you select View Live Stream, that'll take you into a Zoom window. And then from there, I'm actually going to open up these breakout rooms, and you can select which breakout room you want to join. And so you can see on the agenda more details about each breakout room. So take a look and see which one you'd like to join. And you can also see on the screen here, there's just sort of the title of each one. So we're going to give everyone until 11 to get into their breakout rooms, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. So again, please join the Zoom by going into the agenda item, and if you have any questions, let us know. And again, the goal of this, the goal of this first breakout really is because we can't all be together. Normally, advocacy and directly lobbying to legislators is a big part of Justice Day. And something that we're hoping to do with this virtual Justice Day is to really sort of build our skills and build our ability together to be more effective advocates when the time comes that we can be in person, as we're doing so virtually. we really want to build up these skills and build our relationships with each other. And so again, we're really excited to have these breakouts, and I'm going to go ahead and open the breakout rooms now.